Hey guys, thank you for listening to FAMcast. There's a slight mic malfunction throughout this episode, so sometimes the audio will sound a little muffled. The content is still really good, and we would hate for you all to miss this conversation. Please enjoy this episode of the FAMcast.
Hey folks, welcome to the FAMcast. My name is Kyle Friedman. I'm the Worship and Family Ministries pastor here at Hope, and we are so glad that you have chosen to join us for this. And just know that FAMcast is basically real talk with real people, with real issues, with real messes, just trying to point our kids towards Christ. And so we're glad that you joined us. Today, we've got the special honor of being able to welcome David and Elisabeth Dwight. David is the senior pastor here at Hope. And we have a two-part series that we're going to be talking. So the next two podcasts are just going to be parts of our conversation. And so we encourage you to tune in to both of them. If you've missed one of them, tune into the other one. But we are excited about what we're going to be able to discuss with David and Elisabeth. Well, tell me just a little bit about your family, how long you've been married, what makes up your household, all that good stuff.
You go ahead.
All right. We've been married for 37 years, and we have two children. We have Laura and Dave, and they are now in their 30s.
Wow.
Cannot believe it. It's
That's
amazing because we don't feel that old. We feel like we're in our
Exactly.
30s.
Right.
There comes a day where you think to yourself, I don't feel like I'm getting older, but my children are getting older. And by definition, that must mean that I'm getting older.
Yeah.
But it kind of rolls out like that.
That's awesome.
So
and what's the age difference between those two?
They're about 2.5 years. 2.5 years. And just for context, they don't live here in town. They live on the West Coast in Central America.
Yeah, Central America. Not going that far away.
Not Central America.
The central part of North America being Colorado.
There you go.
Right,
Yeah. So we have a daughter. We have a daughter in California, a son in Colorado.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, for you guys, when you transitioned, you've been married for 37 years. How long before you had Dave? Dave's the oldest?
No,
Laura's
Laura's the
first.
oldest. Okay.
So we were married 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
in some sense, not very long. We were in our 20s.
Mm-hmm.
So we were young. I mean, I didn't know anything about parenting.
Yeah.
Hardly babysat. I mean, I babysat some, but
Yeah.
didn't know anything.
Now, did you guys?
You knew more than I did.
This is true.
You definitely knew more than I did. Because I can remember having conversations and I'd be like, I didn't expect this. And you'd be like, what did you not expect? And I'd say something. And I'd be like, did you expect this? And you'd be like, yeah, I think I did. So it's very clear that you knew more than I did.
No, Dave, when you first were holding Laura, did you feel like, did you have those moments of like, oh, I'm going to break this person, or how do I do this?
I don't know that I felt that way. I do remember Laura happened to be born on March 29th. It's her birthday. And that particular year, it was Good Friday. So she was born on Good Friday in 1991. And there was a lot of beauty about that for us, just with the meaning of that weekend. The specialness of a first child, the newness of the experience, the unprecedented nature of, oh my goodness, being parents, what that means.
Yeah.
We had some funny experiences when she was born because, we drove to the hospital and got Elisabeth in, and her regular doctor happened to be on call, and things started proceeding. And then her doctor said to me, hey, have you registered, like checked into the hospital? And I'm like, I don't think so. We just are like, like we have a birth coming, and we just went to the floor.
Just go find a room. There's an empty room.
We had it. You've been texting. You had been not texting. It wouldn't have been texting.
It wouldn't have been texting.
You had spoken to your doctor, and she said, come to the hospital. So we went, and we just went to the labor and delivery floor. Yeah. And she was on call, so she was there. So she starts talking to Elisabeth and starts, preparing and everything. And then she said, hey, you've checked into the hospital, right? And I'm like, no, I actually don't think we have checked into the hospital. So she's like, you need to go downstairs and do that. It's now like 11:45 p.m.
Yeah.
And so I go down, and of course it's all this, your world's exploding, right?
Exactly,
You're going to the hospital, it's your first child, and it's bleary-eyed late night. And I go down to admitting, and I get to admitting, and the woman says, "Are you Mr. Henderson?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, I'm looking for Mr. Henderson." And internally I'm thinking, I don't care who you're looking for. I'm here to check in the hospital. So I'm trying to be like, David, be patient, be patient.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, "No, my name's David Dwight, and my wife is up in labor and delivery, and she's about to have a baby. And I need to do the admitting paperwork." And the woman said to me, "Are you sure you're not Mr. Henderson?" And now I'm getting a little kind of crazy, like, you know what? I am 100% sure that I'm not Mr. Henderson.
Yeah.
And could we step on it a little bit here?
Right.
So anyway, that's a little piece of the story, but yeah.
Well, part of that was because I was getting ready to have a C-section. So
Yeah.
it was
unexpected.
Unexpected. So he was sort of like trying to get back.
We were all thrown a little off kilter, as if you're not thrown off kilter to begin with when you go to the hospital with your first child.
Right.
And how old were you guys when you had your first child?
28.
28, yep.
Yeah.
I think I was 27, 28, somewhere in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's kind of like, wow.
And there's such a weight to that as like, oh, we're about to be parents. And I remember for me too, just thinking like, oh, I got to have I got to have all this stuff together. I got to be, you were probably feeling some of that in the admitting process and everything. I need to take care of this and like, all those kind of things. And I think back to that and just think, oh, I was still becoming as a person, as a man, as all of those things.
Totally.
Becoming is a great word.
Crazy.
Totally.
Yeah.
I remember leaving the hospital, and that was a pretty sobering moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like we got in the car, we had a car seat, and we're driving home, and
I'm
like,
going, what do we do now?
Man.
Yeah.
And I think the way it happens in the hospital today is a little different than 30 years ago when we were doing this. Mm-hmm. Because, they would take Laura and take care of her and have her in like in their section where the nurses would take care of her and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't realize the first time you have a baby when you're in the hospital, you got all these nurses there to take care of the baby and do all this stuff and help you. And baby's crying, they'll take the baby and we can get some sleep. And, now we're like, hey, if they'll let you stay in the hospital for a long time and the nurses will take care of the baby, stay there as long as you can stay.
Exactly.
And let the nurses take care of the baby, because when you go home, you're dealing with it.
Yeah, I think we tried to go back to the hospital and see if they would do that for us about 2 years in, so we could just get a good sleep. But they said no. Well, they said they would do it. It would just cost about $100,000. So
Oh, well.
We're back with our baby who's not sleeping during the night, and so we thought you all could take care of her.
What for you guys in those 4 years? You probably developed a little routine. There was things about first being married, and then now you're about to have kids. What do you think was the biggest difference between married David and Elisabeth Dwight to now parents David and Elisabeth Dwight?
Yeah, I would say all of a sudden there's a different intensity because there's just so much to do. And so it's a new level of partnership.
Yeah.
So, when you're married, as a married couple, you can kind of have some autonomy and have individual interests and have time alone. And then as soon as you have a child, that time alone is a little harder to get, and your dependency on one another is higher because you're taking care of someone who cannot do anything.
Right.
They can't care for themselves. So you're responsible for that. So that new partnership of those, who's going to do what, and defining different strengths and weaknesses and roles. And, there might even be a sense of, okay, is this fair or not fair? Who's has to get up early to go to work, and who's a night person, who's a morning person. All those things get sort of intensified.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of change. So there's a lot of opportunity to communicate and navigate, negotiate, navigate, all that.
All those things. All those things.
I had said a number of times to me, the adjustment to having children was a much bigger adjustment than the adjustment to getting married. And that's maybe a longer conversation for another day. The negotiating part, I can remember, it's all new and you've got a child in the early weeks and they're not sleeping and you're exhausted. And this is an example. I mean, here's how dumb I was. I'm like, did you know that babies don't sleep? Because I didn't know that babies don't sleep.
Right.
And Elisabeth is like, yeah, I do think I knew that. I'm like, well, who told you that? Because nobody told me that. Everybody talks about having babies like, oh, you're going to have children. It's going to be so wonderful. I'm like, nobody told me they don't sleep. So sleep deprivation becomes a major challenge in the endeavor, right?
Oh, completely.
So I remember one night we did, like a lot of couples, we're going to take turns who gets up with the baby at night. So we had this one night and we were both so tired. We couldn't see straight. And Laura is, crying in the night. She's a newborn. So, I roll over and I'm like, it's your turn. Elisabeth says, no, it's not. She said, it's your turn. I'm like, there's no way it's my turn. She's like, it is 100% your turn. And I think I'm like, prove it to me. She said, do you remember last night when this and this and this and I did it? And I'm like, oh, no. So I said to her, I'll give you $1,000 if you'll take this turn. Of course, back then, all the money we had was about $64.
And I said, you don't have $1,000.
She says, you don't have $1,000. Get up. So I get out of bed and I'm so exhausted and frustrated. And I walk around the bed and there's a laundry basket at the end of the bed and I didn't see it. And I smashed my toe into it.
Yep.
And I yelled, a Christian expletive of some kind. Well, worse, I'm walking down the hall now. My foot is throbbing, and I can hear her in the bedroom laughing hysterically. And I'm like, man, this is so not what I envisioned.
I did not sign up for this.
Yeah, the worst part, the most memorable part is going down the hall, and I'm like under my breath, and I hear her laughing back in the bedroom. I'm like, oh.
But then when you pick her up,
everything's peaches and cream.
Beautiful.
That's right. I think one of the neat things that you guys have done throughout the years is taught a class book on love where you talk about marriage. And one of the things that you guys mention in those talks is fighting for oneness in just within the marriage relationship. And it's easier. I don't think it's easy at all sometimes to fight for oneness, just together as a couple. And less hard, yes. So you guys had probably had a pattern of where you were, even if you didn't put those terms on it, where you were fighting for oneness within those first 4 years. How then did that translate? How did you guys have to fight for oneness after not just having Laura, but also having Dave, and being able to fight for oneness there? What were some things that you guys did to make sure that you still had that?
Yeah, very good question. So in that sense of, navigating, negotiating, trying to find time and all of that. And, whereas, before you have children, you can clearly have a date night.
Yeah.
And sometimes date night is elusive when you have a small one.
Completely.
And so you have to really kind of be creative. And I would say in parenting, that might be one of the hardest things I would say there is the creativity piece of it, not only parenting them, but also in your relationship. And I would say prioritizing just even 5 minutes, maybe even 3 minutes, where you're looking at each other's faces and having a conversation, even if it's mundane, but or it is saying when you first get home, we're going to put little Tyke, the baby, in a stroller, and we're going to walk around the neighborhood so we can have a conversation.
Yeah.
Or if they're old enough to play by themselves, to say, okay, we're going to try to see if they can be in their playpen or sequestered or whatever, even for just a few minutes, just to practice that sense of you're important to me, so let's have a conversation. Yeah. Even if it's that 1 minute, to kind of start a pattern.
Yeah.
So be thinking of sort of patterns of how are we going to connect? And is it having dinner after the baby goes to bed, or getting outside, not be too much ships passing in the night, but actually meet up.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I have a lot of memories of all those early years. Picking up on what you said, not always, but often. What also comes with the ingredients in this are new baby, young couple, young careers, not much money.
Yeah.
That often comes together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of at-home date nights, and we would have put Laura to bed or both the kids to bed. We might have a little bit of a later dinner, but then we would really try to carve out making a nice dinner, and it was at home, and it was just the two of us, but we were really trying to make it special and focused and not on the fly. I can remember some winter nights where, again, we didn't have like 2 nickels to rub together. We had a house with a fireplace. We'd build a fire. We'd set up a card table in the living room and put like a candle on the card table and have dinner by the fire.
Yeah.
And those are very clear memories for me. I do remember in a not so easy time where you were home full time with the kids, and I would come home from work and the kids would be like, "Daddy's home, yay, Daddy, Daddy's home, Daddy's home," And of course, I'll embellish it for the sake of the story, but like, "Daddy's home, we love Daddy, we're tired of Mommy, we don't even like Mommy anymore, Daddy's home, yay, Daddy's home." Well, anyway, of course, if you're the dad, you love this. You walk in the door and your kids make you the biggest hero on the planet.
Yeah.
So I was not realizing the dynamic that's unfolding here. Believe it or not, I was a guy who wasn't paying attention to the nuances of things.
What?
So, what? Kyle, you and I can agree on some things, right? So one night Elizabeth said, "I think we need to talk about how this whole when you come home thing works." I'm like, "Really? Like what, why? I love it." I come in the door, the kids say I'm a hero, and we play and roll around on the floor, and it's all fun and games. And Elizabeth's in the kitchen, and she's been working super hard all day long. And, she would make the point, like, I've cleaned up the house 4 times, just in case you're wondering if I ever cleaned it up. This is the 4th time, actually.
Yeah.
But her point was, I'm here all day. I'm with the kids. I don't have an adult conversation. I am weary. And you come in the door and you're the hero, and it's a hard moment.
Yeah.
And so I think we talked about what should we do about that. She said it would be really, really helpful to me, because usually she would be trying to get some dinner going and stuff like that. She said it would be really helpful to me if we could take 5 to 10 minutes and you and I just talk in the kitchen and connect for just a few minutes. And the kids are going to have to wait. They can play a game, they can read a book, they can whatever.
It's great.
So this became a oneness thing. And we began to realize we're going to have to coach the kids that this daddy comes home moment is going to be different.
Yeah.
So it was daddy comes home, mom and dad are going to talk in the kitchen together for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And then after mom and dad are finished talking in the kitchen, then dad's going to come in and play with you guys.
Yeah.
And that became a fairly big deal for us on a number of fronts. And without necessarily originally trying to make it the point, we began to realize that the kids would observe, wait, their connection with each other is coming before
it's huge.
Us.
Yes.
And so this had a lot of ground for us.
No, I think that's huge, because what they saw in that, and probably you were looking at it from a standpoint of, I need a little bit of you before you give anything to them. But what it taught them too was, this is the most important relationship to you guys. And so instead, like I've told my kids, I love you guys, but I love mom a lot more. And that might sound weird, and it could be like a little bit like, oh wait, what? You're not supposed to. But I needed them to know that this was the most important relationship to me, and I think it was one of our ways just to be able to go, okay, we're not going to be our lives are not going to just orbit around you you guys. And you say a lot too between being a marriage centered or your relationship centered or being child centered.
We talk about this quite a bit. I think from a biblical standpoint, I would say that the biblical definition of a family is a man and a woman joined together in a God-centered marriage covenant.
Yeah.
When that happens, you started a family, right? So we talk with young couples about this. Sometimes a couple who's been married a couple of years, they'll say something like, well, one day we're hoping to start a family. We're like, you already started a family. You started a family when the two of you got married.
Right.
If you have children, you'll have additions to the family, but having children doesn't start the family.
Completely.
I remember teaching this many years ago, and it was in Book on Love, and a couple in their 50s came up to us at a break, and they were both crying. We're like, are you okay? And they said, you have no idea how much what you just said means to us. And we said, why? And they said, because we have not been able to have children, and we have always felt that that meant we weren't really a family.
Oh, wow.
So when you clarified that in God's eyes, a family is a man and a woman joined together with a God-centered marriage covenant, they said it was a game changer for them. So another little vision that I like about this is, again, talking from a marriage standpoint, there's only one person on earth to whom I've said, this may make me a little emotional, sometimes when I truncate the marriage vows down to the rock bottom, it's this. I promise to love you and you only until one of us dies.
Yeah.
Okay, there's only one person on planet Earth I've said that to.
Yep.
We love our kids like crazy, but I haven't said that to my kids. Now, I love my kids like crazy, and I'll do whatever I can to love them.
Yeah.
But I did not make that kind of a covenantal promise to my children. I made it only to her.
Right.
And one of the most beautiful moments in a wedding, I think, you have the father walking the bride down the aisle. And if I'm the minister and I say, who gives, Jennifer to be married to Kyle, and her dad might say her mother, and I do. So what does her dad do? He gives her to you. And what does he do next? He goes and sits next to the one person on earth to whom he made this promise.
Yeah.
So your children, you love them like crazy. You love them the very best way you know how, but they will generally move on with their adult lives into independence, which is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And you and your spouse will keep your covenant going until one of us dies.
Right. And I think that's so beautiful for them just to be even to see that, to experience that, and they don't even know what they're experiencing yet. But that begins to seep into almost like the DNA of a family, and that becomes it begins to shape that. And so that's when they begin their family, that's what they're looking for, and so it can help them along in that situation. So I love that. I told Jennifer too. We've got 4 kids. I used to tell her all the time, we'd go, and I might get emotional, but going in to have the next kid, I would tell her, I would just if I get to a choice between you or the baby in this, if something goes haywire, just know that I'm choosing you. We can get through that child not being with us. I don't know if I can do that without you. And so for me, I would tell her that every single time we went into labor, was just I choose you in that. So anyway, I think it's huge. I
mean, what you just said right there, that is really, really powerful. I mean, that's a huge concept topic in its own right.
Yeah.
We may not have time for it, but I mean, you just said something really significant there.
Thank you. Join us next time on the FAMcast as we continue the conversation with David and Elisabeth Dwightl.